silly is that? Pulls up three-pointer. Bang! Bang! It's good! Wins the game at the buzzer!
And we're back. Welcome back to the Hoop Junkie podcast, the #1 sports podcast in the world.
According to us.
I'm your host, Zach, and I'm joined as always by the preseason patron himself, Chance Baker. How you doing, Chance?
Man, I'm doing great. Sunny day here in Memphis. No drama. We're out of the news. Everything's all good.
No drama. No drama.
Can you sense the sarcasm?
Oh, man, dude, it is exuding from your pores right now, brother. Look, man.
Another great day to be a Grizzlies fan.
Oh, dude, like we might as well jump straight on into that topic then. Since you want to go ahead and roll straight into that, dude. So, Chance, I'm at work today and I get a notification that Tim McMahon put an ESPN article out about Ja Morant. I haven't had a chance to read it, so go ahead and recap me a little bit on kind of what the article was about.
Yeah, so I didn't even know anything was out. I was listening. I think like Jeff Calkins or somebody like brought it up on their show in the morning, and I like saw it hit my podcast feed, and I was like, wait, Ja's back in the news again. I was like, oh great, like what happened now? So basically Tim McMahon and was it Baxter Holmes? I want to say is the other name. I'm not 100% sure.
He's local.
So they put together basically an article on the trials and tribulations of Ja Morant over the past few years, essentially. So obviously Ja's been in the news a lot of negative publicity. You can go back and listen to our old podcast as far as like, what all's happened, and you can, check the timeline for yourself, but it essentially goes through really how things kind of fell apart. They kind of listed as like the All-Star. You remember the All-Star game a couple years back when he's on Instagram Live chugging tequila out the bottle? Like they kind of used that as like his breaking point. And so essentially McMahon kind of like got a lot of quotes from not only like Grizzlies front office, Grizzlies like insider sources, but also just like local businesses. They didn't like quote any of the businesses because obviously I don't think they want to be blacklisted or anything, but like they have like a lot of people like from the business community that kind of essentially say like, yeah, Ja was an awesome guy. Like when he first came to Memphis, like his rookie, sophomore years, like, they loved having him around. They loved when he'd come to visit their place. He was always, very polite. And then something happened around that third, fourth year when, he started, he won the most improved player. He was an all-star starter. And then around that time, they just kind of say that things started to switch. They noticed like at that point, once he, enters a business, people are like, oh, great, we have to deal with Ja Morant coming in, when they used to love seeing him come in, and different things like that, just different like anecdotal stories about how, he started to change around that time. And it essentially takes you like through a timeline of, all the situations, the Pacers situation. For the most part, there wasn't really any new information that came out. It was all, repeat stuff that we all had already known about, which is a good sign. Like there's no more like he punched another kid or something like that, which was great. But they just kind of like gave a couple like details during the Pacers game, for example, when they had the red laser, situation. Apparently, like shortly after that, Taylor Jenkins and Kleiman, the Grizzlies GM, had met with him in a hotel and like had to sit down. Like that was their first true, like, okay, we've got to get this together. Like your behavior is kind of spiraling. And according to the article and from the sources within the Grizzlies, they said that like he was just not very receptive to that. The meeting ended just as awkwardly as it started. And it kind of seemed like not much was going to change. And I believe that because what did we hear? Like once all this happened, like, yeah, they've tried to, tell him before and, nothing ever changed. And so like that seems pretty believable to me. Overall, like I'm in some Grizzlies like Twitter group text, and I obviously follow a lot of Grizzlies fans, and people aren't too happy about it, from the Grizzlies fan perspective. Personally, this might be a hot take. I thought it was pretty fair. I thought, they didn't uncover. I think it could have been a lot worse. They didn't, go too deep into things. There were a couple problems I had with the article. They kind of allude some of it to the whole rap music culture and him having a grill. I thought some of that was a little unfair, where they kind of make that distinction. I didn't really like that side of it, but overall I thought the article was written pretty well. It was just kind of a summary of like what all's happened, how he got here. And it's really just an opportunity for Ja Morant to go back and, be like, yeah, like maybe I have changed a little bit as a person. And that was what was most revealing to me, is like, he really has changed, as a person. Like when he first came into the league, he was this humble person. they get into that in the article too. They're like, we talked to his high school coaches, we talked to his college coaches. There was, no off the court issues at all. Like he came in, he grinded every single day. So they kind of allude to how, there were no like previous instances of this. Like they talked to a couple different teams during the draft process that scouted him. And they're like, yeah, we had nothing like that on our radar. Like we had no red flags as far as him like off the court. So like essentially when Ja Morant entered the league, he was not this, kind of person with his baggage, and something happened along year 3, year 4 when the money and the fame got to him. They make a lot of distinctions with T Morant too, kind of saying that, which I've kind of heard this before. If you kind of follow what, happens with the Grizzlies, that there could be a case that T Morant kind of lives that NBA lifestyle through Ja Morant. Apparently, like even before Ja turned 21, they were like going to strip clubs together and stuff, which to me is kind of strange. Like who goes to strip clubs with your dad? Like I love my dad, but we're not going to go to the Pony together. So that was kind of weird.
I don't know,
But
man. My dad would 100% take me to one.
so yeah, that maybe that's fair, but yeah, they kind of allude to T kind of living that glamour lifestyle through John. Apparently T, like, I've always kind of been a defender of T. I think if a dad is supportive and he's sitting front row at every game, like I admire that. I think T has his faults, but obviously there's a lot behind the scenes that I don't know about, but I've always kind of been a defender of T for that reason, because, overall I think he is a supportive dad. And, I think that's a good first step. He might go a little too over the line with stuff, and they kind of allude to that too. But overall, I mean, you'll get a chance to read it later on today, but I thought it was a pretty well written article. It's pretty fair. And now
Yeah.
it's on Ja to decide, like, hey, is this the person I'm going to be moving forward? Or maybe I have changed along the way, because I do fundamentally think Ja deep down is a good person. I've seen him
hmm
after games, even last year, after all this stuff where he's, meeting kids after the game and giving them his shoes that nobody else in the world has. And I've seen pictures and videos of him at my own high school that like hardly anybody even knows about, where he's at summer camps there and hanging out with the kids and dunking and stuff. This is at Munford High School, whoever's listening to this probably don't even know where that is. But I think Ja is a good person. I think he just has to get back to those roots, and something along the way with whether it be the money, the fame, or both. Like it's easy to fall into that lifestyle when you have, all this going for you. They said that like essentially every time they get on a road trip, they said they would pull up to the hotel and there'd be like a private minivan or like a little Sprinter van there, and they'd pick up Ja, they'd pick up his family and friends, and they'd go out for the night. Ja covered like all their expenses. So he's buying his all family and friends, flights and hotels for every single road trip. They're going out until 3 a.m. And it was pretty widely known that like this was going on for a while. And so overall, not too much new information, kind of just filled in the gaps a little bit as far as the details go. And I'm sure Ja wasn't too happy about, waking up and reading that his name was in the headlines. But the good news is there's no new instances, and
Yeah.
hopefully we get through, no more new instances in the future too. And it's just on Ja how he wants to respond to it.
Well, and and you and I might have a different take on this because I mean, with us having a podcast, so we obviously have a respect for journalism, right? Like, so I could definitely see how fans are like, dude, why are you rehashing all of this old stuff? Just let it be water under the bridge. But honestly, man, that sounds like some great journalism.
It was, yeah. I thought it was pretty fair. I mean, it was interesting to read from, for me to just go back and read, how it all came apart, like how, where that breaking point was. Like, was this something that Ja was always dealing with, or did it happen at a certain point? Like overall, I thought it was pretty well written. Yeah, I was scrolling through Twitter and it was all these like, no, Kleiman should revoke Tim McMahon's media access and all this stuff. And I'm like, man, like, he's doing his job. And yeah, there is a case to be made that you've got guys like Miles Bridges and Kevin Porter who have their own legal issues, and you don't really hear about those as much.
whoa, whoa,
But
whoa, whoa, hold on. You saw in Kevin Porter's case, Kaiser. I don't know if you've seen this, but we don't have to cover this today. But for some reason, she put out a long statement that was a whole bunch of like I don't know what's going on. So I don't know if she's backpedaling that whole situation, but it's
yeah,
almost like she's trying to protect the guilty.
yeah,
And
I saw that. I saw that she put out some statement that said that he never did anything. I think overall, like Kevin Porter has, a lot of things that he has to deal with, regardless of what's true and what's not true. But
hmm
having said that, I do think there is an argument to be made that like, that doesn't get as much coverage, but Ja is a
hmm
superstar athlete. And, at the end of the day, even if what he did was a lot more minor compared to, these serious allegations, he's still one of the faces of the league, and whatever he does is
yeah,
going to come under more scrutiny. And I mean, if you want a superstar in Memphis, you have to accept that, if he makes mistakes, that's going to be blasted a lot more. compared
Yeah.
to, somebody, like a Kevin Porter, making a mistake. So I get that too. I get the argument though, but overall, yeah, I thought it was pretty fair. And yeah, Tim McMahon might be blacklisted from Memphis. He won't be eating any good barbecue anytime soon, I guess. But
It's not the first place he's been banned from. Mark Cuban banned him years ago.
oh,
Out of the
really?
out of the AAC. Was in the middle of the whole, like, ESPN was having a dispute over team coverage, and then Mark Cuban and McMahon got into a spat of words because it was during the time after the championship when the Mavs were kind of sputtering. Dirk was playing on one leg, and I think McMahon had he was spending a lot of time in Houston and wasn't spending as much time in Dallas at that time. And then McMahon may have said, well, like something along the lines like, well, if your team plays better, I'd be here more, or something like that. And which was pretty accurate. But
Yeah,
Mark Cuban
pretty
didn't
fair.
like that. So then Tim McMahon got banned, and then eventually I guess Cuban and ESPN and Tim McMahon found a way to 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 jump that hurdle. So it was funny because Tim McMahon, based out of Dallas, couldn't even go to Dallas Mavericks games.
I'm glad they were able to rebuild their friendship. No, sometimes these owners are just a little sensitive sometimes.
Oh, definitely. Cuban is definitely one of them.
Yeah, from
Uh,
what I've seen for sure.
but the one thing too with Ja, man, like he should, and I get it. Ja's young, and Ja's emotional, and all that stuff shows on the court, right? And
Mhm.
if I'm Ja, I'm looking at this like, yeah, all this was true. And because even at the time, we got it on tape with having this podcast. Like whenever he came out with the first apology with Malika and sat in the chair and all this stuff or whatever, we all were like, yeah, I'm not buying this. Like
Yeah, the
he
Jalen
is.
Rose interview.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
the Jalen Rose interview. Excuse me.
Yeah,
I'm
it seemed a little like just on the surface, like it didn't really check the boxes. It looked like he was just
Mhm.
kind of like rehashing the script that his PR team, gave him, and so it
Yeah.
didn't seem genuine at the time. Obviously, we learned that it wasn't once the other incident happened 2 months later. So yeah,
Yeah, and this just kind of puts us in that place of like what all was going on during that time, and it all kind of checks out. But obviously, having this 25 game suspension, uh, I think that's gonna be a big wake up call of like, hey, I can't move like that while I'm representing the Memphis Grizzlies.
yeah. There's a quote from Kleiman in there. I don't remember the exact words, but it was essentially like Ja's words don't mean anything at this point. Like he has to prove it. So like, yeah, Ja can get on Twitter and issue his apology. He can do his one-on-one interviews with whoever and say that he's sorry. But like until you actually like show that, and you're like keep your head on straight. Basically just stop waving guns for a couple years. Like until you actually do that, like, the apologies aren't going to really mean anything because the first time, it's like, okay, yeah, he's doing what he has to do. But then when the actions keep happening, then it's like, okay, the apologies, they kind of lose value when they seem like they're just words. And so that's it for Ja. He has to decide like, okay, like, am I going to finally take responsibility or am I going to see this as just another media hit piece out to get me and all this? And, from what I've read and heard about Ja, like I could see it going either way. Hopefully he,
Mhm.
takes this as a learning lesson. I think they said Taylor Jenkins came out and said that like, they 100% support Ja. They, met with him and talked to him about it because obviously it's hard when you've gone through all these mistakes and they get rehashed over and over. And I get that,
Right.
you're trying to put this behind you. And then here's this other article that's, recapping all the bad things that you've done. And so hopefully he takes that as a learning moment and, all we hear about Ja for the next year is basketball, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, and then update on Kevin Porter Jr. I know we briefly talked about him. He did get traded from the Houston Rockets to the Oklahoma City Thunder for, I believe, 2 second-round picks, and then was immediately waived. Uh, I think his NBA career is definitely up in limbo right now. Right. Same thing with Miles Bridges. I saw that Miles Bridges just was recently had to turn himself in for a violation of his parole.
Mhm.
So it just goes to show you how like these NBA teams, man, they make a big investment with drafting these guys at the top of the lottery, and it kind of just goes to show you how much a risk like this can be from a business investment, right? Like if you can't have a player that's not professional and can't just do what he needs to do to show up to work,
Hmm.
then it could be really detrimental. Because like you look at the Rockets, team that's rebuilding. Luckily, they've drafted well. They've made good free agent signings. I think they'll be okay. But you draft someone, Kevin Porter Jr.'s talent, and then you have to basically get rid of him at the beginning of his career, and to get rid of him, you got to dump assets along with
Hmm.
it.
Yep.
And then Miles Bridges, another case where they might have to let Miles Bridges at the end of this year. They might have to let him walk for nothing if his whole situation doesn't check out, right? So, man, it's just being an NBA GM is a tough gig all the way around.
Yeah. It is, yeah. I think as far as Kevin Porter goes, I think it's likely he's probably out of the league. I think he obviously had all the talent in the world, and he flashed that at moments, but he always had some issues off the court, and then with this situation, boiling, I think him getting
Yeah.
waived immediately, I'd be surprised if he finds his way back in the league. He could end up overseas or something, and hopefully he's able to rebuild his career. I do wish the best for all of these guys. I think everybody deserves a second chance, and I hope he can learn from his mistakes. And yeah, on the Bridges thing, same thing. Charlotte, that's just what a mess that they have over in Charlotte right now.
And we hadn't even talked about Kai Jones. Hey, I'm gonna tell you
Yeah.
something, man. Hey, that song was kind of, hey, man, that song was kind of bumping, man.
I haven't heard it. I saw it, but I haven't heard it yet. Yeah, I'll have to try to set aside some time for that one.
Yeah, yeah, man. But look, in other news, we got a lot of drama in Philly right now, Chance. So we
What
thought
else is
things were
new?
going to be good. James came back to Philly, showed up at practices, and then all of a sudden decided he wasn't going to show up to work no more. Joel Embiid was like, "Well, I guess he has
Yes,
something else more important to do."
I saw that. Most classic Joel Embiid response to the
Yep.
situation.
And there's rumors that James Harden is actually in Houston, of course.
Yeah.
Uh, so Chance, what do you just make up of all of this stuff with the Sixers? Is are the Sixers basically going to be forced to be in a position of where they're going to have to trade James Harden for pennies on the dollar, or just ride out the rest of his contract this year and lose him for nothing?
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point it gets to a situation where you have to weigh like at what point does this, drama start to negatively affect us? Because as of now, it's like preseason training camp. That's one thing, but once this carries over into the regular season, and I mean, as of now, it seems like Harden's not going to be in that opening day lineup unless something changes between now and next week. But if this gets to where it's affecting the team on the court, then at that point you have to decide like, okay, I might have to sell for 60% of what I could have gotten just to be done with this, have this story end. Because in my opinion, like it makes sense for everybody for Harden to play. Like Harden can show, his value,
Hmm.
so that the Clippers or whoever he wants, it seems like it's the Clippers will, be willing to trade for him. For Philly, obviously they need to show that Harden is still able to play and, still an asset on the court as well. But, as long as this keeps happening, Harden's value only goes down, which really just hurts everyone involved aside from the team that, like the Clippers trying to trade for him. So LA might just be sitting back like, yeah, let this keep happening. And in a month, I'll get Harden for a second round pick or something. But at this point, like it makes sense for Harden to play, but I don't know what he's got going on. It was weird how he showed up and now he's not showing up. So I think if you're Philly, go into the season, see what, the situation is. But if it seems like this is really like affecting your team on the court, then you don't want to end up in December where you've still got this thing lingering with Harden every single week. You've got, the Philly sports talk is all about Harden and not about, the play on the court. So at some point you have to decide, when enough is enough and you just get him out of here.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a tough situation because Philly is you get rid of Ben Simmons, and then by all accords, Ben Simmons might be back this year, right? Like as far as back to his old self, by some of his teammates. But
I'll believe that when
yeah,
I see it, but
yeah,
wish him the best.
I got to see that in the regular season in real full time minutes, and
Right.
it's got to check out for me.
Yeah.
Um, but they move on from Ben, then they get to James, and they're back in the same loop. And then, I hear, being a Dallas Mavericks fan, you hear all these rumors about, okay, well, Dallas doesn't get their stuff together. They're going to lose Luka Doncic, right? But like, man, the player to watch to me, the next big star that might be on the move might be Joel Embiid,
Hmm.
because if this James Harden thing doesn't work out this year, then there's some serious questions with that Philadelphia 76ers roster going into next year. With Tobias Harris on his last year of his deal, you've got a young Tyrese Maxey, but then really kind of outside of that, there's no big pieces around Joel. Where you've got a guy who's had a battled injury history over the last decade, man, he might sit here and say, man, how many more good years in my prime do I have left to sit here and stay with this Sixers team and all this drama?
Yep. Yeah, would not be surprised at all.
So, anyways, in lighter news, Chance, we finally got some basketball back on, man, and it feels good having basketball back on my television screen.
Have you spent a lot of time watching the preseason? Are you a big preseason guy?
I'm not a huge preseason guy. I'm big on, like, I'll turn the game on, but then usually I'm not watching it to the same degree. I've watched, like I watch regular season games, right? I'm not sitting there watching it, and it's hard. You can't sit there and look at matchups and see how these certain matchups do against other matchups, and then playing on how these teams will look against each other in the playoffs. And
Right.
you don't get any of that with preseason,
Yeah.
because one, you've got half of the games being played by a whole bunch of dudes that are going to end up in the G League or the Euro League, uh,
Hmm.
um, into the next year, anyways. But then, so you really only get like first quarters, second quarters, of seeing these star athletes. But my biggest takeaway, Chance, we've talked about those Boston Celtics not having a lot of depth, which I'm still concerned as the season goes on, from like injury and health standpoint stuff. However, in a playoff series, if everybody can stay healthy, all you really need is about 7 to 8 strong rotation players in the playoffs,
Hmm.
to really advance. Really, probably 8 to 9, honestly. But outside of that, you really don't need much else. And I'm liking what I'm seeing from some of the others out of the Boston Celtics, to say the least. You got when they put their white boy lineup out there for the Boston Celtics, man.
The next
with
white chocolate, Peyton Pritchard.
boy, Peyton Pritchard is out there balling, and I remember we've talked about this with Peyton Pritchard about being upset with his role in years past with the Celtics and thinking that he needed a bigger role. And now, I mean, he's getting it. He's the
Yep.
first guard. He's the first guard off the bench when Drew Holiday goes down, right? So, seeing him out there orchestrate offenses, and Kristaps Porzingis, when was the last time he looked this healthy?
Yeah. Yeah,
Like,
that's the key for them. If Porzingis is healthy and if they get contributions from their bench, Peyton Pritchard, it's funny. He's always a guy that I've followed because this YouTube channel that I used to like watch like training videos, like Peyton Pritchard back when he was in high school, like before he even went to Oregon, like they had this random Peyton Pritchard on there, and he's like showing his ball handling and his shooting workouts. I'm like, man, this guy seems like he'll be pretty good one day. And then he committed to Oregon, and I've just kind of like low key followed him all throughout his career. And it's kind of cool to see him finally get an opportunity that he'll be playing rotation minutes for a contender. He's always been kind of a back end. If a couple guys are hurt, like he'll play 15 minutes one night. He's had some pretty big games at like the end of the regular season when no one's, really playing, but now he'll get a chance to show like he belongs out there, like in crunch time or in these big, like fourth quarter playoff minutes. So I'm curious to see how he responds, because that's the key for Boston is they've got their big six of, their starting lineup minus whoever comes off the bench. I don't know if that'll be Horford or Derek White or what their situation will be yet. I know they brought Drew off the bench to start the preseason. So
mm-hmm.
I don't know what their
Yeah.
full like starting lineup will be, but they have their big six. And can they get a Peyton Pritchard, a Sam Hauser, someone else to really step up and show that they belong? Because like you said, you only need about 8 key guys in the playoffs. And if they're both playing well, then plus your other 6, there's your 8 guys right there. So yeah, I'm with you. I think they've kind of shown that they have what it takes so far. Another guy that was impressive to me that I'm really curious how his season goes is Tyler Hero. He dropped like
Mm,
31 on the Grizzlies. I've only really watched Grizzlies games in the preseason. I can watch
right.
any NBA regular season game. I haven't spent a lot of time just watching like random ones, but I was really impressed with Hero, and I think he'll have a chip on his shoulder coming into the season just because all summer it was, Tyler Hero has to be the center of the trade, but no one wants Tyler Hero. And people forget Tyler Hero can hoop too. And I think he's really going to have a chip on his shoulder this season with all the trade talks going in. So I could see him having a big year. And he seemed like he was ready for the moment in the preseason as well. So all in
Yeah.
all, I can't wait for next week. We're finally about to get regular season basketball, and it's so exciting to me. I'm so pumped.
Dude, I like what I'm seeing from the Suns as well. Dude, like we forget Bradley Beal led the league in scoring not too long ago, and now you're asking people's third best defender to guard Bradley Beal.
Yeah.
Um,
When he's your third
that
option, that's scary.
yeah, that Suns team is going to put up a lot of points.
Hmm.
In the West, I definitely see how that's going to work. Dame and Giannis, in the limited minutes they've played, it looks like just like what you would expect. You
Yeah.
gotta choose. Are you going to defend the rim, or are you going to step out to the 3-point line? You have to pick, and picking between those two is an impossible task. So,
Yeah.
uh,
Giannis after the game, he was so funny in his quotes. He was like, "Yeah, I've never played with a guy that commands a double team like this before," which is kind of a shot at his previous teammates, but he's also not wrong.
yeah,
There's never been a player like to Dame standards, that played alongside Giannis. Like Chris Middleton is, a great player, but he's not commanding double teams the way Dame does. And so, yeah, I'm
hmm
really, really can't wait to see how they look in the regular season. That seems like it's going to be deadly, and they'll definitely be one of the top 2 or 3 duos in the league. So a lot of good stuff. NBA always has its drama, but here soon we'll be able to put that aside and watch a lot of really good basketball, and I can't wait.
And Chance, and just not too long ago, we were sitting here talking about where are all the American white boys, right? And we got done talking about your affinity for Peyton Pritchard, but you know what other white boy been balling, Chance?
Who's that?
Chet Holmgren.
Yeah, yeah. Chet looks like he could be good. Like he might push Victor Wembanyama for Rookie of the Year since he's technically still eligible. That'll be a really good race. I can't wait to see that Thunder team with another year of development under their belt. Really curious to see what kind of season they have. There's some arguments that people are jumping, a little ahead of the gun on them just because they're still so young. But man, they've got so much talent. They keep collecting picks where they could throw 3 or 4 firsts at a superstar during the deadline if they wanted to and get another player. So yeah, really curious that Shea Chet duo could be a really good one to watch too.
Yep, for sure. Anyways, we've done enough updates on kind of what's going on in the league. You know what it's time for, Chance?
Let's talk about the West.
Let's talk about the West. All right. So to start this thing off, we're going to start off with my home team, Dallas Mavericks, Chance. So as you know, Kyrie Irving re-signed to a 3-year deal with the Dallas Mavericks. They also did a sign and trade, brought in Grant Williams. They brought Seth Curry back to Dallas. They drafted Derek Lively at number 12. And so far, he's looked good in the preseason.
Hmm.
They also drafted Olivier Maxence Prosper. And also made the trade, brought in Rashawn Holmes. Christian Wood is with the Lakers now. Reggie Bullock was traded to the Spurs, and that deal to get Grant Williams. JaVale McGee has gone out the door. So they basically lost Christian Wood as the only Christian Wood and Reggie Bullock as the 2 rotation players, and the rest were fringe guys like JaVale McGee, Davis Bertans. But overall, this Mavs team, we know what they struggled with last year. It was defense, and that's what caused them to miss the play-in and ultimately missing the playoffs, right? So, Chance, does this Mavs team have enough to make the playoffs this year?
Man, with how deep the West is, I hate to say it, but I still see the Mavs around that play-in line. And I love the moves that they made. I love the Grant Williams signing. I think he's a perfect complement to Luka and Kyrie. I do like the draft prospects, Omax and Lively, but overall, like it's hard to expect them to be major contributors in year one, which they might be asked to do. So I think that's a tough situation. But I'm worried about their front line. I'm still worried about the defense, although Grant Williams will help that. And again, you still never know what Kyrie's going to do now that he's got his money. He could go off the rails again too. But overall, I just need to see it from the Mavs and see that they actually belong in that upper echelon. As of now, I'd still have them around that 7 to 10 range as far as like play-in team, maybe even 9 to 10 range, just because of how deep the West is. But I mean, Luka's still Luka, and if we get into going into Christmas and the Mavs are the 4 seed and Luka's an MVP candidate, like I wouldn't be too surprised just because Luka is that good. But I still think he doesn't really have quite enough help surrounding him yet.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Mavs are at best are a playing team, just with just how deep the West is, and we'll go through some of these other teams and we'll talk about them. But I just think if the Mavs can somehow get in a play-in game now, a play-in with Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic on your squad, I think that probably helps you.
Yeah,
In that case, whenever we're just talking about elimination games, however, I think for them, getting in the play-in and then ultimately trying to sneak into the playoffs is probably going to be their best bet, because at that point, then it's Luka and Kyrie versus whoever they're playing, right? So
right.
I think that's kind of ultimately what this team looks like. This team is probably still 2 or 3 more moves away, which they can make those moves next offseason with having their array of picks back. And then also now you've got a roster full of a whole bunch of role players and stuff that you can also combine with some of those picks to maybe another team to kind of get a disgruntled player that's out there on the market.
Yep.
So, Chance, the defending champ, the Denver Nuggets. Man, Chance, we talked a little bit about this team just kind of this summer. Like they lost Bruce Brown, they lost Thomas Bryant, they lost veteran Jeff Green. And then overall, they didn't really do much. I mean, they drafted uh, Julian Strawther at number 29, Jalen Pickett at number 32, and Hunter Tyson at number 37. And then they brought in Justin Holiday, an end of a bench guy that did his last stint in Dallas. And then the rest of that is just re-sign Reggie Jackson, re-sign DeAndre Jordan, and re-sign Colin Gillespie. But Chance, is Denver still the top dog in the West?
Honestly, I'm not super impressed with their offseason, with the moves they made, losing Bruce Brown. That hurts you, obviously. And they didn't really have a ton of draft capital. They got the, lower level picks, obviously. But I still think they're the top dogs just because I think Nikola Jokic is just that good. And as long as they have him and Jamal Murray healthy, that still is among some of the best duos in the league just because, Jamal Murray, like going into last year, he was coming off the ACL injury. It really took him a good month or two to really get going and kind of find his rhythm again. Like he struggled out of the gate, whereas this year he has a full summer under his belt. I could see Jamal Murray like finally making that case to be an all-star in the West. And, there's an opening now with Dame out. So I could see that being a case. And as long as they've got both of
Mm-hmm.
them two healthy, you can say their depth on the back end is a little lower, losing Bruce Brown and losing Thomas Bryant. But overall, if those two are healthy, I don't see a reason why they wouldn't be, the 1 or the 2 seed again. Losing Bruce Brown hurts, but there's also that effect that, Jokic is going to make everyone around him better. So not to say that Bruce Brown is not a good player, because I do think he's been one of the most underrated players for a couple years now, but I don't have any reason to think Christian Brown can't take another leap and still give, meaningful minutes for them. I thought he looked good in flashes in the postseason as well last year. So as long as those two are healthy, yeah, I think they're still the top dogs in the West.
Man, same thing. Like this Nuggets team, I mean, you think about it. They dealt with some stuff. Jamal Murray, they won a championship in his first year back from that major injury. That usually doesn't happen, right? When your second best player is coming back from an injury of that sort and is
Mm-hmm.
able to help in win you guys a championship in big moments. Now he's got a full season under his belt. He's back, and so I really think this Nuggets team. Granted, a lot of the competition is going to be a little bit tougher this year. However, no way to me this team isn't at least a top 3 or 4 seed going into the playoffs this year.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Chance, the Golden State Warriors. So we all know last year they started with a bang, no pun intended. But they also traded the beneficiary of that bang, Jordan Poole, in a trade to acquire Chris Paul. So they lost Dante DiVincenzo. He went to New York to join all of his other teammates from Villanova in New York.
Yep.
And then overall, they re-signed Draymond Green. And other than that, they just made moves around the fringes. They also like bringing in veteran Rudy Gay, bringing in Rodney McGruder, Lester Quinones, and other than that, Dario Saric, and then some rookies that aren't really expected to play a whole bunch. Chance, are the Golden State Warriors, is this their chance to make one last push with Klay Thompson's contract up in the air for next season?
Yeah, and it sounds like they're not really close to getting a deal done there. So that's another story that'll be kind of lingering on the Golden State side. They're an interesting case to me because, I feel like they do have one more year left in them. I think Steph, even in his mid-30s is still just that good. But we've seen Draymond kind of slowly decline. Obviously, it was hard to ask for Clay to be, what he was before, and he's, not that same player, although still, obviously a way above average shooting guard, but not what he used to be pre, ACL, pre Achilles injury. I would put them like kind of in like the second tier, like behind, the top dogs like Denver, maybe Phoenix. But I do still think if they get all the right breaks, they have a chance to make another title run. This is probably the last year that you could really go all in for that title, depending on what happens with Clay's contract situation, because all these guys, they're not getting any younger. They all have their injury histories. Draymond's already got a rolled ankle, and his status is up in the air to begin the season as well. So they don't have the depth they used to. Kaminga, talk about guys that have looked good in the preseason. Kaminga has actually looked pretty good. He might finally be ready to
Mm-hmm.
take that leap and be a solid rotation player for them. So yeah, I think they're kind of right outside that top tier, but as long as they've got Steph and Steph is healthy, which is a big key, they do have a chance to finish, with that home court advantage. And then from there, you get into the playoffs and, we know what Steph can do in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, like, to me, the writing's on the wall that this is their last run. I mean, I've got some concerns on how the Steph Curry and Chris Paul backcourt is going to look for a full season. But who knows if that's what they actually end up sticking with, is both of them playing a lot of minutes together, right? So um, Kerr's got some rotations to figure out.
Yep.
Hopefully he does a bigger job, a better job than he did this summer
Yeah.
with the with the national team. But I'm sure he'll figure it out. I mean, that team, every time we rule them out, they always find a way. So I'm not going to do that with this team until they actually close the door on their own history. So Chance, Houston Rockets, right? So uh Kevin Porter Jr. out the door, right? And they drafted Amin Thompson at 4. He's looked pretty good. They've got Fred Van Vliet, Dylan Brooks, Cam Whitmore, who looks great.
Yep.
By the way, because he fell all the way to 20.
Hmm.
He was expected to be a top 5 pick in the lottery. But then they got veteran Jeff Green, and they brought in Aaron Holiday, Jock Landale. They re-signed Boban. Overall, this Rockets team was pretty active, with Fred Van Vliet and Dylan Brooks being their biggest signings coming their way. Overall, Chance, do you think this Houston Rockets team has enough to compete in the West?
Definitely not enough to compete in the West at this point with how deep the West is, but I do think they have enough talent to where last year it's like, oh, we play Houston tonight. Like you can go and put a W next to their name. Like I think they're a team that with the veteran leadership of Van Fleet and with Dylan Brooks, like these are guys that are going to compete every single night. Like there's not going to be a night that they take a night off. I've seen Dylan Brooks play the last 4 years. I know the intensity that he brings, and I think regardless of his decision making, hitting people in the nuts still happening like within the first 5 minutes of his first preseason game, like he's already getting ejected. But overall, like, Dylan Brooks is going to bring that intensity. Fred Van Fleet is going to be a leader on the court. And I think that's going to be really good. Obviously, they made a coaching upgrade too with Ime Udoka. So I do think they'll have enough that like those veteran presence can, inspire the rest of the young guys to make sure they're bringing it every single night as well. So they're a team that they might catch you. If you have a bad night, they're going to catch you and they're going to sneak away some wins that they probably have no business being in those games. But overall, I mean, they're not going to be a play-in team unless, something crazy happens. They're not going to be, fighting for a playoff spot, but they're a team that you won't be able to take quite as lightly as last year, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I said this on another pod. I said I'm watching Houston and I'm watching OKC this year. Those two young teams that might be, they might surprise some people.
Yep.
So, Chance, the LA Clippers didn't do a whole bunch. They re-signed Westbrook. They got Kenyon Martin Jr. in the trade. Eric Gordon was waived and ended up in Phoenix. Mason Plumlee re-signed. Drafted Kobe Brown at 30 and drafted Jordan Miller at 48. Josh Primo ended up finding a landing spot. After his rocky stuff that went on in San Antonio. Overall, Chance, with the new resting policy and everything that the Clippers have felt attacked by, right? You've seen all these reports about Kawhi and PG talking about, man, we want to play, but like we got real injuries, right? And so with all this stuff going on, do you really feel like the Clippers are still a threat in the West?
So the Clippers are funny. Like, you know how you mentioned like Golden State, like we always doubt them and then they come back when we don't expect it. We kind of said the same thing about the Miami Heat on our last pod. Like every time we doubt them, they come back. With the Clippers, I feel like it's the opposite. Like I feel like we're always giving them the benefit of the doubt. Like just wait till they're all healthy. They have these big names. Just wait till they're healthy. And now it's like, okay, I think it's time to stop giving them the benefit of the doubt until I actually see it and until I see that they are healthy, they're ready to play a full season, they are playing well together. Obviously, they still have the Harden thing lingering where they might, end up making a move for him, but I don't think he's improving anybody's team chemistry or anything like that by any means. So until I really see it, I'm not sold on the Clippers. I'd put them in that lower tier. They obviously should be a playoff team. They're well coached where even if, guys are sitting out, not able to play full seasons, they should still be in the playoffs, but I still don't see them beating a Phoenix, a Denver, even a Golden State once we get to the playoffs because I just can't trust these guys to play a full 7-game series. And until I see that, I'm just going to assume that's always the case.
Yeah, we'll see it. I have nothing else to add.
Yeah.
So let's go across the hall. The LA Lakers. AD got that big contract extension. Austin Reeves got paid. D'Angelo Russell, they're bringing him back on a short-term situation. Rui Hachimura, they're bringing him back. They signed Gabe Vincent from Miami. Jared Vanderbilt, they locked him up on a contract extension. They brought in Christian Wood. Tareem Prince, they brought him in. Jackson Hayes from the Pelicans, they brought him in. Cam Reddish as well. He has an opportunity to revive his career. Chance, this was a very active team. Uh, this offseason. Are the Lakers finally prepared to give LeBron one more chance at winning his 5th title?
I think they are. I think the moves that they've made, last summer and even going into the second half of last season, I think they put themselves in such a better position than when we look back like around the holidays last year when they just looked like they were, sinking really quickly. When you look at the moves they made, Gabe Vincent, I think that's a great fit as another guard in their rotation. Not too sure about Cam Reddish and Christian Wood. I think those are guys that a lot of people wrote off, but if anybody can save them, it is LeBron. And obviously getting Austin Reeves and Vanderbilt on good deals, I think those are both great moves. And so when you've got one of the best duos in the league of Austin Reeves and Anthony Davis, then I think it could be a contender. And then LeBron as your third man, as your third option.
I'll say, look, Chance, man. Look, I told you, you white boys are up right now, man.
Austin Reeves, yeah. From what I saw with him over the summer, he is just continuing to get better as well. I think the ball will be in his hands a lot more this season now that he's had a full year to kind of prove himself. He's playing with a lot of confidence, and I mean, in all seriousness, a big three of LeBron, Austin Reeves, and Davis is
Yeah.
one of the best big threes that you could ask for. And then D'Angelo Russell, I'm still of the opinion that he probably is not on the Lakers post trade deadline. So they'll probably get another asset for him. I do think Gabe Vincent's a great fit. I think they're among that upper, first and second tier in the West of teams that could make a run and could get another title. So I don't see any reason to doubt them at this point. I think they're a very well constructed roster. They've got some depth over the offseason. I'd feel great if I'm LeBron going into this season.
Yeah, I would too. Overall, I mean, I think they got a shot to be a top 4 seed in the West for sure. And then you get LeBron James in the playoffs. I don't think anybody's gonna want that matchup. So that's just how that goes. So Chance, your Memphis Grizzlies, right? Didn't do a whole bunch, but the moves they made were very impactful. Um, Dylan Brooks gone to Houston. Tyus Jones, the backup point guard for Memphis, had always held. held the fort down when Ja was out. He is now in Washington up there with Jordan Poole. So you guys re-signed Desmond Bain to a contract extension. He got paid. Brought Marcus Smart in from the Celtics. Ended up signing Derrick Rose, the veteran. And then outside of that was just a whole bunch of moves around the fringes. But overall, Chance, how are you feeling about your Memphis Grizzlies going into the season, even with John Morant's 25-game suspension?
Honestly, I think even with the suspension, the Grizzlies have enough talent around him that they should be able to stay afloat. The schedule is not too crazy those first 25 games either. I think this is a team that has every opportunity to, even with the suspension, be a top four team in the West. I think
Yeah.
the duo of Bain and Jackson, they've looked great in the preseason. They look like they're ready to go. I think the Team USA, although he didn't look great in the role that he was given, he's not going to have that role in Memphis, and it was still a great opportunity for Jaren to develop on both ends of the floor. I think Smart is a great improvement over Dylan Brooks. He still has that defensive versatility, but still not a great shooter, but he's going to make better decisions and a much better playmaker that can hold that down, while Ja's out. And then he'll be a great, secondary playmaker behind Ja once he's back. So I think the big thing is, you want to stay healthy. You can't really rely on a lot of these guys to play, 70 plus games due to their injury history. And then for Ja, we already talked about the situation, but can he just stay sticking to basketball, stay out of the headlines, no distractions? And if that's the case, I don't see any reason why this team can't be a top four seed in the West again.
Dude, I mean, I 100% agree with you. I mean, this team that, like this Zach Kleiman and the Grizzlies have went for quality depth, right? And I think now you've got these players that are a little bit older that they've drafted over these years, where these young guys are turning into vets. So you know how that goes, where vets eventually they figure it out. So overall, I like what they did. They got rid of Dylan Brooks. I think that a lot of people in Memphis are ready to run him out of town. But I think over time you'll see his value, especially when you start playing some of these bigger wings, or even the case of some of these bigger guards in the league. Now, Marcus Smart plays up in defense, so I think he'll make up for a lot of that. But I think that hole is still somewhat there. But outside of that, that's literally the only question mark I have on the Memphis Grizzlies roster. So usually, if that's the only question mark, if you only got one question mark going into the season, that's usually pretty good, because there's a lot of teams with one, two, three, or like my Dallas Mavericks probably have like 6 question marks on it. So,
Yep.
overall, I feel really good about the Memphis Grizzlies' chances going into the season.
Yeah, look out for Zaire Williams too. He had a really good preseason. He looks like he might have won that starting spot on the wing. He's got the length. He's got all the potential to be that defensive guy. I'll have to see it to believe it first, but that could be a guy that could fill that hole. And if that's the case, then the sky's the limit for this team if he can reach his ceiling.
Yep. So, Chance, the Minnesota Timberwolves, Anthony Edwards contract extension, Nas Reed contract extension. They re-signed Nikit. I don't know how to say his name, but Alexander Walker.
Nickeil Alexander Walker.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you, sir. And they brought in Shake Milton, Troy Brown Jr., and then they made some draft picks with Leonard Miller at 33 and Jalen Clark at 53. The only people out the door, Tareem Prince, and then Nathan Knight. So overall, this team really didn't do a whole bunch. However, Chance, there's a lot of hope and optimism that this team, with the rise of Anthony Edwards, that this team is going to be significantly better than they were last year.
Yeah, I think they could be. I think when you talk about the Team USA experience, that benefited no one greater than it did Anthony Edwards. I think he showed that he's ready to be that number one guy, can go get a bucket whenever you need it. And I think that was a great experience for him too, to go in and say, okay, like this is my team. We're ready to go. Obviously, the huge question mark, the huge elephant in the room is Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert. Can they play together? We had limited sample size last year because of Towns' injury, but when they were on the court together, it didn't look great for the most part. So I think you roll into the season and see how that looks. And if it's not what you want, I think Towns is the one to go, just because, you just traded all these assets for Rudy. Towns probably has the better value right now, where you could still flip him, get some other pieces and build around Edwards and Gobert. So that could be a situation that happens. Or maybe they just needed some time to gel, which obviously happens a lot in the NBA, and they just didn't get that last year. So I do see them as a team that should be right around that playoff play-in bubble, around that 6 seed area. They've got enough talent that they should be there, but roster fit is just the biggest concern. So seeing how that plays out with Towns and Gobert and if they can gel together. And if that's the case, then yeah, they could be really good this year.
Yep. So, Chance, another team didn't do a whole bunch. New Orleans Pelicans. They drafted Jordan Hawkins at 14, re-signed Herb Jones, brought in Cody Zeller, Jackson Hayes out the door to the Lakers, as we said earlier. Josh Richardson signed with the Heat. Garrett Temple got waived, and Willie Hernan Gomez is going back to Europe, going to FC Barcelona. So, Chance, Zion looks great. He's back healthy. Is this the year that we get a full Zion season and we get a rocking and rolling New Orleans Pelicans team?
I don't think so, man. I'd love to see it.
Oh
But the
man.
vibes are already off with this team. To me already. The injuries, you got Trey Murphy already out for, seems like he might be out for a couple months to start the season.
Mm-hmm.
Zion, he looks great so far, but again, it's kind of like the Clippers situation. I have to see it to believe it, and I just don't have faith. And even, he looks great, but he still doesn't look like that guy that he looked like his rookie season to me. He still doesn't have the same spring in his step, the same bounce, and I'm just concerned that we might have already seen the best of Zion already. Maybe I'll eat my words on that, but I think this team is going to be sort of around bottom of the play-in, possibly even missing the play-in depending on the injury luck. If they can get Zion for even
Whoa.
60 games, I'm just not super high on the Pelicans this year. So I think that's a team that is going to be fighting for a play-in spot.
I disagree. I disagree. You got CJ, you got a healthy Zion Williamson, knock on wood. I'm assuming he's healthy. I think this is the year we actually get a healthy, motivated Zion. He doesn't
Think
have to
so?
worry he doesn't have to worry about dealing with porn stars stalking him on Twitter, any of that jazz. You got CJ McCollum that's there, that's not just being traded in the middle of the season and just trying to figure things out. He's got a full training camp. Uh, and then he's got a full training camp with Zion. Everybody's got a full training camp together. Granted that the Trey Murphy injury does scare me because him, Herb Jones, and Larry Nance Jr. and Alvarado, the way they play, those role players are super important uh, for that Pelicans team. But overall, man, I think I'm trusting CJ, Brandon Ingram, and Zion to put it all together. Now, the big issue is Herb Jones can't hold everybody.
Right.
Like there's big questions from a defensive side of things. But I really think that this Pelicans team is at the minimum a play-in level team. I really think that this team is probably going to be anywhere between 6 to 10.
I think there's a good argument for that. And, Dyson Daniels, speaking of a guy that could fill in on that defensive role, like he looked great at moments as his rookie year. I just think the West is so deep. And when I'm going through the list, the Pelicans are just the team that if I could see one team, because there's really 11 teams that belong in that play in. So one team is going to be the odd man out. And if I had to pick right now, obviously we'll do our predictions pod coming up. But if I had to pick right now, I would pick the Pelicans as that team just because, yeah, they look great now, but how long will that hold up? And once Zion goes down, Ingram has his own injury history. CJ's getting up there in age. I just don't trust them to keep it together for a full season. But if the injuries turn around and they stay healthy, they do have all the talent in the world that they could be the 6th seed. And, the talent would obviously deserve that. So we'll see how it goes. Let's see how Zion looks these first 2 weeks. If he comes out just putting up his 28, 7, and 5 like he was at times in his rookie year, I could be eating my words really quick. But as of now, I just think one team has to go, and they'd be the team that I'd pick at this moment.
Okay. Chance, OKC, another young team, right? Drafted Cason Wallace at number 10. Drafted Keontae Johnson at number 50. So I thought they had a solid draft with bringing those two players on board. They got the Latvian flamethrower Davis Bertans from Dallas. Victor Oladipo. Scratch that. I think he actually was a part of
Yeah,
that
he just left in
KPJ.
the trade.
Yep, he was in that KPJ trade. So he's gone. Overall, all they lost was Dario Saric and Jared Butler. But this team with a core of Shea Gilgis Alexander, Josh Giddey, Jalen Williams, and Chet Holmgren, they've got a lot of young guys. But chances that budding flower that OKC has always been, is it now finally time to bloom?
I think it's getting there. I think they're in that kind of in between stage. I do think some people might be jumping the gun as far as them being like legit contenders this year. I still think that they have to kind of, have their lumps a little bit in the playoffs first. I think they will be a playoff team, maybe even a non-play-in, like 5 or 6 type seed.
Yeah.
They have all the talent in the world, and the key is, like we alluded to this before, they have so many draft picks that if they get off to a hot start, there's a disgruntled superstar, as we know there will be at some point during the season because this is the NBA. They can go through a 3 or 4 first and still have 10 more in their back pocket. And, they can go get another guy to pair with these guys. They could go get like an
Mm-hmm.
OG for a couple first if they wanted to, or apparently he's worth 4 first, but they could just toss that aside and not even think twice about it. So I think they'll be a team that's in the playoffs. I don't see them beating like a Golden State or an LA, or a Denver, like an experienced veteran team. They're not quite ready to take one of those monsters on in a 7-game series, so they'll probably be matched up in the first round. But I think they'll be a lot of fun to watch. I think they'll make the playoffs, and they might steal a couple games from them. I just don't think they're quite ready to be like a second round team yet. But I think this is the start of something, kind of like what you saw with the Grizzlies when they made the playoffs that first year. They had the gentleman sweep against the Jazz. They only won 1 game, but they kind of had that experience. And then from there, they've been a top 2 or 3 seed ever since. I think this is that year for the Thunder where they take this step, they get some playoff experience. And then the next few years after this, they're a perennial like top 3 seed in the West. So I think this is just that kind of middling year for them.
Yeah. Well, I'm high on OKC, man. I don't think they're going to be a play-in team this year. I think they will be a
Yeah.
playoff team this year. I think. You saw SGA had that meteoric rise last year, according to some people. Even though I think even on this pod, you and I have been SGA believers since the SGA believers for a long time, to say the least, right? But now he's on everyone's radar. But man, watching Chet Holmgren, I think Chet Holmgren is for real. If Chet can stay healthy, obviously as a big in today's NBA, it's well, not even in today's NBA, just in history, bigs have usually had a hard time with that transition from college to the pros. However, I think let's not discount that redshirt year that Chet got last year by being able to train with all these NBA guys. And so I think he's going to come in with the head start. And then obviously, I'm not going to give my prediction here, but some might say he might have the up on Wemby for Rookie of the Year.
Yeah.
So, Chance, the Phoenix Suns. We talked a little bit about them and about how they look so far in the preseason. But to sum it up, obviously they brought in Brad Beal. They got Yusuf Nurkic in that big deal with DeAndre Ayton going to Portland, and that whole Dame situation. They got Grayson Allen from the Bucks. They got Nasir Little in that deal with the Blazers, and Keon Johnson. They re-signed Josh Okogie, re-signed Damian Lee. They also brought in Eric Gordon. They brought in friend of Kevin Durant, Yuta Watanabe. Brought in Drew Eubanks, Keita Bates-Diop, Chimezie Metu, Bol, Udoka Azubuike, and then Jordan Goodwin from the Wizards, and also re-signed Saban Lee. They also, in this, they got rid of Chris Paul, got rid of Cam Payne, got rid of Landry Shamet, got rid of Torrey Craig, Darius Baisley, Jocelyn Bell. So, as you can see, they did a huge overhaul of their roster. But overall, Chance, how do you feel about the new Matt Ishbia Phoenix Suns?
So I'll be honest, I wasn't I won't say I wasn't a fan of the Bradley Beal trade. We talked about it. We thought it made sense, but I was
Mm-hmm.
not really a believer as far as like they're going to be instant championship contenders just because I was concerned about the depth that they would have on the back end. But I really like their summer. When you talk about the value they got, Eric Gordon as a veteran, Yuta, I think is a great pickup. Katie's best friend, as you mentioned, I think he'll give them some great minutes. I think the Grayson Allen move, Grayson Allen is a knockdown shooter. And when he's playing with these other guys, he's going to get wide open looks. And he's a guy that could
Mm-hmm.
have a sneaky good year, as a 5th option for them. Obviously, Nurkic is, probably a downgrade from Ayton, regardless of our thoughts on Ayton. And we'll see how Nurkic, basically holding down the fort, trying to defend, with this offensive juggernaut that doesn't have a ton of defense. So there's going to be a lot of weight on
Mm-hmm.
Nurkic's shoulders protecting the paint. And I have some concerns about that. So for that reason, it's hard to envision them beating Denver in a series, but they have so much offensive firepower. If they stay
Right.
healthy, with, KD, Booker, this could be, Booker's breakout like MVP type season.
Yeah.
Bradley Beal as a third option is just absolutely ridiculous. So they've got the firepower. The two keys for them are going to be defense and then just staying healthy. We haven't seen KD stay healthy for a full season in a long time. Bradley Beal's had some, injury concerns as well. So if they can stay healthy, they're going to put up points on anybody. And, I have no reason to believe they won't be a top 2 or 3 seed regardless, just because they have so many weapons. KD could miss 2 or 3 weeks and they've still got Booker. They've still got Beal. They've still got other shooters around them. So I think they'll be an offensive juggernaut. They're going to be a contender. It's just, can they have the good injury luck once they get to the playoffs is the key.
Yeah. I mean, I feel the same way, Chance. I think my big 2 question marks for the Phoenix Suns going into the season are point guard play. Does having Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant, and Devin Booker, is that enough to run the offense, or do you actually need a traditional point guard
Right.
to run that offense? Early returns of it would say probably not, because you can just keep passing it around to whoever doesn't have a good defender on them
Right.
and let them figure it out. But then the other big question mark is, Yusuf Nurkic has never been a rim protector and has never been that. So from that standpoint, I'm concerned about easy shots at the rim. However, this team, that might not even matter, because if they're able to put up 140 on you a night, most teams don't have enough firepower to keep up with that
Right.
anyways.
Yep.
So those are my 2 question marks, which, all that just kind of remains to be seen. So, Chance, the Portland Trailblazers, Scoot Henderson, drafted number 3, looks good. DeAndre Ayton comes from the Suns. It seems like he might be happy and motivated. They got Robert Williams from the Celtics. They got Malcolm Brogdon from the Celtics. They re-signed Jeremy Grant, re-signed Matisse Thybulle, drafted Chris Murray, Keegan Murray's brother, at number 23. And then also drafted Rayan Rupert at number 43. And then outside, who's out the door? Obviously, Dame Dollar, gone. Nasir Little, gone. Keon Johnson, Drew Eubanks, Cam Reddish, Trendon Watford, and Jonathan Williams, gone. So overall, Chance, it seems like Portland's headed for a rebuild. But overall, how do you feel about their rebuild so far?
I think they've done great with the assets they had. I thought they got great return, and they've got, more guys that they'll probably flip at some point throughout the year when you look at Malcolm Brogdon and Robert Williams. Overall, I see a lot of similarities to Utah last year when they came out the season guns blazing and they're like a top 2 seed in the West the first month of the season. I could
Mm-hmm.
honestly see something like that happening with Portland as well. I think they've got a lot of talent on their team. I think Scoot is going to come out guns blazing, because he's motivated already, taking, filling in for Dame, taking his footsteps. And they've got a lot of real NBA players. Like, this isn't a team that just has a bunch of scrubs. Like, when you look at
Right.
Brogdon, a vet, Matisse Thybulle's been around, Jeremy Grant, DeAndre Ayton, Anthony Simons, I think could be in for a breakout year with the new opportunity that he has. I think this team should be actually pretty good. I don't think they're going to be a play-in because obviously they're going to end up selling off more pieces. They're still in rebuild mode, but I think this is a team that if they came out the gates like 10-5 to start the season, I wouldn't be
Mm-hmm.
shocked, because I do think they could sneak up on people. But overall, they have a clear goal in mind. They're rebuilding. They'll make sure that they stick to that goal, but they've got enough talent to surprise some people this year, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Chance, light the beam. Sacramento Kings. They re-signed Sabonis to a contract extension. They got Chris Duarte from the Pacers, and then they got JaVale McGee as a free agent. The Sasha Vesnikov. They re-signed Trey Lyles, re-signed Alex Lynn. Uh, Overall, I mean, they lost Chimezi Metu and Rashawn Holmes, and Della Vadova is going back overseas. Overall, Chance, how do you feel about the Kings? Are they going to be able to improve off of that breakout year they had last year?
Yeah, I think it's hard to overall improve because of how deep and stacked the West is. They're relatively quiet. They didn't do a ton over the offseason. Sasha from overseas, from what I've read about him, he could be a solid little role player for them. But overall, they're keeping their same core, which why not? I mean, you had a great season, run it back and do it again. But with how deep the West is, it's hard to believe that they could be another, 3 seed coming out. But I still think they should be solidly a playoff team. Um, could flirt with the play in depending on injury luck just because of how good the West is. So I don't see them really taking a step up and being a first or second seed. But I still see them around that 4 to 5 line. I think they're deep enough that they can compete where, a team like the Suns or the Warriors could get, a couple injuries and all of a sudden, they're going to slide really quick. I think the Kings have enough that they can overcome some of that. Fox could be continuing to take a leap forward. He had a really big breakout year last year, but overall, I still put them on that middle tier where they're not quite good enough to make, a conference title run or even a finals run. But I do think they'll continue to be fun to watch. And I see no reason to think that they'll take a huge step down. I just think the West is so good. They're probably right around the middle, in my opinion, right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So, Chance, the San Antonio Spurs, obviously, they drafted Victor Wembanyama with the number 1 pick. He looks great. So, and we've talked to him about him ad nauseum. They re-signed Trey Jones. They also drafted Sidi Sissoko at number 44. I may have butchered his name. Sorry, City. But then Cedi Osman traded from the Cavs. Julian Champagne re-signed. But overall, the big thing is they drafted Wemby. So, Chance, is he going to have a LeBron James year where he drags this Spurs team out of the gutter and challenges some teams in the West? Do you think anything like that's going to happen this season?
No, I don't think anything that outrageous will happen. I think he'll have a good rookie year. I think that the expectations on him are so high. And he was a LeBron level prospect, but he's not NBA ready the way LeBron was when he came into the league, where like he's ready to go get you 20 points a night, right then. I think Wembanyama, the way, his skill set and his frame, like it's going to take some more time. We're going to see flashes. We're going to see like some absolutely outrageous plays by him where he might be catching his own missed 3-pointer and dunking it again. Like something like that's going to be crazy. We're going to see a lot of Twitter highlights and people are going to go crazy, as they should, because he's just an absolute maniac and insanely fun to watch. But overall, like they're clearly rebuilding and they're not ready to win yet. So I think it'll be fun to watch. It'll be fun to watch the highlights, but overall they're heading in the right direction. I mean, when you get Wembanyama, you're heading in the right direction, regardless of who the other 14 guys are. But, they're not going to be seriously competing with anybody just yet. But, I'm in for the Wemby show and I'll be tuning into Spurs games, on League Pass as many times as I can.
I know, man. I'm excited to watch this kid, man. He is different. Like,
Yeah.
it's very rare where you have players that come in the league and you say, oh, yeah, we haven't seen anything like that. But then you can usually kind of find somebody that's similar. No, we hadn't seen one like this. So,
Yeah.
I'm excited to watch him. Chance, last team of the day, the Utah Jazz. They had a surprisingly successful season last year. We thought they were going to be a league bottom feeder, and they just weren't that. They got John Collins for basically nothing from the Hawks. They re-signed Jordan Clarkson. Had a solid draft with Taylor Hendricks at 9, Keontae George at 16, Bryce Sensabaugh at 28. Overall, Chance, do you think the Jazz are ready to make that leap, or are they still going to be kind of one of those teams that's going to be not an easy out, but not really moving the needle?
I still think not an easy out, but not moving the needle. I think they've got some talent, but again, I keep coming back on this. The West is stacked this year. There are just so many good teams, and I do think the Jazz, have some talent, but not quite enough to where they'll be in the mix. I could see them possibly being, floating around the play-in towards the end of the season, but overall, I'd put them on the outside looking in. But I do still think the future is bright for them. I think, with Laurie Marketing having his breakout season, I'm curious to see, what he does coming back from that, building on that momentum. John Collins, can he get back to, pre-crazy hand injury John Collins, how he looked with Atlanta before? I think that could end up being, sneaky good value that they were able to get him super cheap. But because of how stacked the West is, I see them on the outside looking in. But they could be a team just like the Rockets. They'll sneak up on some people. They'll catch some people on bad nights. But overall, I see them around that 11 to 13 range in the West.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of there with you. But also this Utah Jazz team, like, I wouldn't be shocked if I end up shocked again.
Yeah.
So, oh no, I think it all just remains to be seen with that team. But anyways, Chance, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you once again for going through this Western Conference team. To all of our hoop junkies out there, please make sure to like, subscribe, and also leave us a comment. Who do you guys think is going to be the one holding that Western Conference trophy at the end of the season? Let us know. All right. Until next time, we'll holla at you. Peace.